very much to Jason, Terence, Tasman, Kath is also here somewhere, the whole team. Thanks a lot. And thanks to you guys for coming. The more people we get here and start talking about these things, the better. Okay, so quickly, before we tackle that slightly intimidating slide, my name is Marcel, or Marceli, as Tasman put on my label. My mom used to call me Marceli or Buddha. Please don't call me Buddha. Just quickly where I'm from Fjord. We're a service design company. We're the design and innovation arm of Accenture. And when Jason talked a little bit earlier about designing the void of the bigger picture, that's more or less the space where we play. We do look at the smaller interactions, but our passion is designing the whole experience for the customer and all the touch points and how that bigger picture looks like for large organizations. Okay. So with that said, just a quick punt, but also related to the talk. Every year we release a trends forecast or a document called Trends from Fjord, and really a lot of work goes into this, into seeing what's happening out there. We get input from 12 branches across the globe to see what's underlying, what's happening out there, and kind of try to compile this as kind of a stab into the future. So I'll be covering 4 of these. There are 9 all in all. And I'll be covering 4 of these that relate to atomization of services. I've got 4 of these booklets to give away at the end of it. And Jason and me were discussing whether we should have a scrum session or just throw them into the audiences. I don't know. We'll figure something out. Okay, so atomization of services. What the hell does that mean? This is a brilliant quote. I like this quote a lot. It's from David Weinberger. He's one of the co-authors of the Clue Train Manifesto. Who's read the Clue Train Manifesto? Yes, Terence. It's a brilliant look on the web and what it means to people. It's a bit punkish in its outlook. It's one of its main tenets is that it should be open to everybody. But this is to me almost like the Einstein quote of the internet. The internet's a series of small things loosely joined. In its most simplest form, that's kind of what we're dealing with. But of course, things have become a little bit more complex as we've moved on from those early days. So it's one of those small things, how they relate to each other and what they're doing. I'm trying to kind of unpack in the next few slides. So I made a timeline. I hate timelines, but I made a timeline. It looks a little bit like this. So let's try to attempt to see where we are. Starting from the left with RSS, Google RSS. And RSS really changed the world. Who remembers Google Wave? Wow. Okay, I'm really old. Things like Big and Reddit. Anybody still do Reddit? Yeah. APIs, stuff like Facebook Graph and Twitter and Storify is a great example of how APIs were used to kind of collect content. That was around about 2010. I was so much into content back then. I was a bit gaga about content and what content can do. But APIs really enabled a lot of that. Aggregating content and also Facebook Graph was an amazing, at that stage I thought a feat of taking data about people and collecting them and distributing them again. Then things like cloud came along. Amazon was doing an amazing job of collecting data and working with it. You got stuff like Evernoting, interesting things, Flipboard, I'm sure you're aware of. That little funny little triangle is called if this then that. It's the logo for if this then that. Who knows if this then that? Amazing thing. When that came along, I was like, wow, that is fantastic. You go there and basically it plugs in all these services, all these APIs, and you can start combining them. So if an event happens in your Twitter feed, you can do something, potentially send a mail, or hook it up with another API and have something happen somewhere else. Really cool. And now we're in kind of a starts getting a very busy here on the right-hand side. You've got stuff like Fitbug and Nest and Square Cash. Who's used Square Cash? You've seen Square Cash. So that's basically doing payments using mail. You've got stuff like WeChat, doing payments within a chatting platform. You've got Uber, everybody knows Uber and what Uber does, but really it's an amazing feat, and there's a reason why Uber is coming up more and more and kind of an example of how physical and digital is merging. But all these things, and the atomization of things, are starting to come to the fore because of what's happening right now in terms of the Internet of Things and data being so prolific, stuff being ubiquitous. You've got little devices all over the place, sensors, ambient devices, and products and services blending and merging and playing in places where they never were before. So atomization is not just about services breaking up into smaller little pieces and going elsewhere, but it's also about how those pieces are being collected again and put together in new ways and forms. It's also about the relationships between these things and new ways we see how these relationships are formed. And to a certain degree, it's how computers are helping us automate certain processes for us. And atomization of things are making it easier and easier to start kind of fitting these pieces together and make things work almost seamlessly. But I don't really like the word Internet of Things because, yeah, it's a bunch of things, but what do? They kind of provide us with services. They provide us with, they kind of surround our lives and enhance and augment our experiences. And I feel we like to call this, well, just hang on a sec, before I get there. Internet of Things obviously means a couple of things: wearables, nearables, and hearables. You've heard about wearables. Nearables are kind of ambient devices that would be in the room, but you wouldn't really notice them. They're kind of invisible. Hearables are kind of a new term, but it's things that, it's devices that can sit in your ear and, for instance, monitor your heart rate. So that is becoming really invisible, but very close to your body. But we're saying really that we don't want to talk about the Internet of Things. We want to talk about living services, all those devices and things standing in your room and being around you is fine. What are they doing? Essentially, they should be enhancing your life and augmenting it and making it better. So the idea is that living services are constantly learning about what you're doing, your needs, and they're adaptable. They should be intelligent. They should be able to flex and adapt to your daily lives. Here's a quote from Mark Curtis. It says, "At this point, what matters not is what the means of delivery, but the service and its relevance to what you're doing at a specific moment." Nothing new, really. But I want to compare it to a quote in 2010, when content was all the hype. At the end of the day, I don't think the user really cares about where the content lives. They want useful information. Basically says the same thing. I want to draw that parallel between where content was at that stage and where services are moving now. So where content started atomizing and going out there and breaking into little pieces and serving us in ways we never thought, services are doing the same thing now. But there's a few things that are coming with it that makes it a little bit difficult to deal with potentially. A few dangers around the curve of the road. So I want to address this in relation to this holy trinity of business, design, and tech. This heavenly little menage a trois. And the customer sitting there in the middle. You can see him in the middle there, right? They all happily going along. The customers there in the middle. Hopefully enjoying all of it. Okay, so designer would probably say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. From a technology point of view, it would probably say something like, if something can be done, it probably will. Business would probably say, whatever, just show me the money. Show me the money, I want the money, where's the money? That's not that. Actually, there's a little bit, why are we in business? We want to combine human insight and technology and hopefully provide a better service so we can be profitable. But seriously, there's few dragons around this new world where atomized services are becoming more and more prolific all around us. There's increased complexity. And that is, by implication, it's very straightforward. If you think about it, all the different touch points. On a technological level, it becomes very challenging because you're dealing with multiple points of data, all these sensors bringing things back in, and then taking that data and making so that then making new services that make use of that data and pushing it back out into the field. It's your relationships with your customer, your service providers, and the people that work for you, actually. It's a loss of control. So if you think about atomization of services and taking of things out there. Sorry. Taking of things out there into the wild, I think it's a bit scary for large corporations and large brands because you think about APIs and what that means. You're putting your brand and your service to a certain extent into somebody else's hands. And I think large corporations are going to have to be more brave about how they tackle that. They're going to have to be brave to survive. They're going to have to be brave and reach out to smaller service providers, smaller vendors, people that are innovating, and team up with them to come up with unique combinations and get their brand out there and their service out there. Lots of data. And blurring of lines. Again, it's about brands and technologies and people blending and exchanging ideas. It's about things happening in social spaces. There's all sorts of weird things happening nowadays. And the lines are getting a bit blurry about what exactly is your business about. Okay, so what to do? You have to do 4 things. That's it. Done. These are just 4 icons that represent the 4 themes I'm going to talk about. Really abstract, weird little Scandinavian icons that the guys in Europe did with our new branding. But 4 themes, starting with the first one. Mind the gap. So what's Mind the Gap all about? Mind the Gap is saying that people are moving from different spaces all the time. People are switching devices all the time. And are we really catering for that as designers, as businesses, and as technologists? Are we really looking at those gaps? You know, people can move from one space to another, and suddenly they don't have connectivity. Are we designing for that? Are we catering for that? You know, here's a starting statistic, all right? Consumers in their 20s, or digital natives, switch media on average 27 times per non-working hour. That's a lot. So it's about gaps between devices, gaps between services. Again, that's about partnership and seeing where your service starts and ends. What's on the peripheral of that? Uptimes, updates. So who does it really well? One is Spotify. Spotify really does a lot of effort in making that whole experience as seamless as possible for you. If you move from one room to the next, it even tells you you're playing from the living room. If you switch devices, it does a lot of effort in kind of making that experience seamless as possible. Here's an interesting one, a retailer. Okay, so what John Lewis realized is that 53% of their online orders are now click and collect. So that means, that's a huge insight. Usually we thought that, you know, online purchases would stay online and then somebody would deliver something to your door. And what John Lewis realized is that people like to make the order online, but they like to go and collect it at the store. And for them, it was getting really important to make that experience as seamless as possible. Making the order online, but then going on in store and collecting whatever you ordered. Okay, so again, using that Holy Trinity, what can we do about it? From a business point of view, this is maybe a bit vague, but being ready means really being responsive to what your clients are doing. because there are these gaps between devices and services, as an organization, as a business, you need to kind of be ready to and responsive to their behaviors. So it is considering where there might be gaps in your business and how you can respond to, for instance, John Lewis being able to serve their customers online and taking orders, but fulfilling that in the real world. I think tech needs to work really hard behind the scenes and to make a really special and unique and delightful service nowadays takes a lot of work behind the scenes from a technological point of view. And then lastly, from a design point of view, it's designing for between screens. What I mean by that is exactly those moments where there is downtime, where something would happen, where someone moves from one space or another, or again how someone moves from one service to another, or how they use your service on one device or one platform and then moves to another. Is there, how do you make that as seamless as possible? And then the edge cases. So what we're finding is that a lot of people are using services in unique, interesting ways in those gaps to make it work for them. And I think the challenge for designers is getting to those insights. Who is using your service in unique, interesting ways, and learning from that. Sorry, I'm very thirsty. All right, so the second trend is 6 cents. So this is really saying that it's fine and well to design things for people that make their lives easier. To a certain degree, it also touches on designing for joy, such as a couple of things that Ray talked about. Excellent talk, Ray. But designing for joy, and what is the considerations going into that? 6 cents is saying, well, it's okay to put the button there where somebody is expecting it and making them, or enabling them to do what they want to do, but can you actually predict what they want to do and make it that easy for them to complete things? There's a couple of challenges around this, but one of the people that do it very well is Amazon. Amazon actually patented a new feature called anticipatory shipping, which they claim can predict what you're going to order next, and in anticipation of that, they start shipping product to geographical regional areas. So that optimizes the way they ship things around the world and their logistics to a great extent, to the extent where they can even start discounting things. So it's really optimizing their business model, but it's also offering the consumer discounts. It's amazing. Okay, Uber, fantastic example of how things are blending between physical and digital and online. But Uber also nowadays is claiming that they can predict 75% of their passengers' final destinations. So again, that's a fascinating notion to think that someone like that would be able to predict where you want to go. I love Google now. I think it's a really interesting example. Does anybody have the experience of Google now telling you about your flight? When I first saw that, I was like, gee, that is amazing. I was on the Gauw train on my way to the airport, and I got this notification. I didn't ask Google now to do that. I didn't set that reminder up. I just got that because it read my Gmail account, and it saw that I was due to board a plane in an hour's time. Okay, so for business, I think there is ethical considerations here. We're dealing with a lot of data. Big organizations are dealing with a lot of data, and what's the ethics behind preempting something, using that data behind the customer's back to kind of start potentially pushing things to them. On the other side, it's also being really responsive in terms of enabling the workforces. So if you think about things happening on the fly and really in real time as things are happening, that takes a lot from an organizational perspective. All right. Obviously, it takes working with data, because if you can't extract those insights and really extracting, at a rapid pace. These kind of predictive services won't happen. So it's really having a good knowledge of data, now you can use it in real time, and what it means and what it looks like. For design, obviously, it's taking that data and designing for it. So I don't think we're at that extent there where we can start developing predictive services. I'd be really happy. I'd be really surprised if we see these things coming out in the next year or two. But we can, as designers, start using data to create delight for our customers by knowing what their patterns are, what they're using where, and start to kind of preempt some of that. But it comes with a caveat. It comes with saying it shouldn't be denied. You can't say to them, look, I saw you taking out the trash the other morning, you need a new wardrobe. It can get a bit creepy. Alright. Third one is be effortless. And this is really where wearables, hearables, and those kind of things can enable effortless experiences or fluid experiences. We can move from one space to another or move around quite effortlessly. And the Disney Magic Band is actually quite cool. I don't know if you've heard of it, but essentially if you go to Disney, you get your Disney Magic Band and you can take it anywhere, get access to rides, etc. It opens the door to your hotel room, and at this stage, they're thinking of like Snow White greeting you when you walk into the gates. So it's really making the whole Disney experience seamless and effortless. Okay, so Google Home, this Apple HomeKit is really trying to create this platform, this ecosystem which will make your connected home effortless. And I think there's going to be a lot of competition in this space, but if you think about those ecosystems and platforms, some are going to be more open, some are going to be potential walled gardens or protecting their IP. But really it's about creating this platform or ecosystem where you can latch onto and again create services on top of that platform within the home environment. A big part for business is, I think, where to play. You can make things effortless and easy and start thinking about interconnections or interactions between services and systems. But as a business, you have to kind of really decide where your brand wants to play, because it's a really wide, wild, open world out there, and also entails what ecosystem or platform you want to choose if you want to partner up at the end of the day. Again, for tech, it is about platforms and ecosystems, because you're creating platforms and ecosystems for the purpose of these connected interactions to take place, to provide fertile ground for that to happen. For design, it's really interesting because I think this is maybe one of the biggest insights for me is, as a designer, you need to start thinking about modular design. And that's really starting to break things down. I think the future is you have to think beyond interactions and think about the bigger system and how you're designing for that. One consideration is, where is home? So there's been some debate around what your phone plays in this world, in this ecosystem, and whether it's the center of that world or whether it just makes up a part of that world. For now, we're saying that your phone is going to be centered to that world, and it's going to control that world, and you're going to get data from all these little devices and adding devices out in the field. But really, your phone's going to be home. That might change in the future, and we're seeing some devices coming out there, wearables, etc., which is kind of taking over to the point where your phone becomes a passive screen, and the device is your control. Okay, last one. Aggregation moves to services. So kind of what I touched on previously. All these things are out there in the world and dispersing and blending and making wonderful love with one another. Where they kind of kind of getting back together again. This is where If This Then Matters, a wonderful example of that. It's been around for a long time, but I felt it worthy to just put it out there because that's a wonderful example of how these APIs can be put together to create new things. As services, I think it takes a lot of bravery for a brand or big organization to say, okay, cool, we're going to expose our services, we're going to expose our products and make it open and let other products and other brands potentially play with us, and see what happens. One app that's interesting in doing this is Tempo. So Tempo is kind of like Google Now on steroids in the sense that it's really opened up or allowed you to use Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus, etc., and create like a unified experience in planning and managing your day. And that goes from selecting a gift for someone's birthday to, again, flight planning and so on. So it's taking the calendar and taking all the APIs from these social networks and services you already use and combining it into basically a calendar service, but quite a fancy one. So iGuarantee is a bank in Spain that is really good at taking the bank and saying, well, what are people doing on the periphery of payments and everyday banking? They're shopping, they're looking at things online to buy, they may be communicating with one another, and they really did a lot of effort in seeing what are their customers doing, especially the Generation Y segment. And came together with a lot of retailers, put banking and retail together, and social media and banking together, and created this platform where all these things are kind of coming together on their app and on their digital channels. So for business, it is really about extending your brand, but carefully, because I think again you have to consider who you're partnering up with. It's important. It's important because I don't think a brand can be everything to everybody, and you have to know what your core competency is and your core offering is. But if there are things around the periphery that you can offer to your clients, who are the partners and the people out there that can make that happen for you, or you can potentially collaborate with. From a technological point of view, it's about APIs or SPIs. Service protocol interface potentially. But it's interesting. I'm thinking about banking, and services like Simple, or in Cape Town we've got 22. You can tell me. 22/7. Sorry, Clint. 22/7. So I mean that's an example of a service taking your banking statements and bringing it in and making something really interesting of it. But I think for banks, it's an interesting time, and APIs in the broader sense for large organizations can be really interesting in terms of what it enables them to do. For designers, it is about what happens before and after anybody interacted with your service. What are they doing before and after they played something on your on Spotify, or what are they doing before and after they ordered a coffee, which is something that Starbucks is looking at. A lot of this is around travel. A lot of the things that the examples that we found is around travel. So what is someone doing just before they board a plane or board a train, etc. And then this is something that I think Joel touched on, but I believe I think it's core to kind of where we're going. I think it's not necessarily designing the experience, because people are essentially having the experience and they're augmenting the experience, not just with your service or your app or there's lots of things influencing them, and you're trying to enable a certain experience for them. So I think in that sense, it's not about designing experiences, it's about designing capabilities or enabling your customers to do certain amazing things, make their day a bit better. And in that sense, it's also about believing that everyone designs. So the question there is, can services become so pliable and modular and responsive that anybody can start kind of really shaping the experiences they're having? When you play a part in that, and maybe partnering with someone, or you're playing a part, maybe a big part or a small part in that ecosystem, but essentially that person is shaping that experience for themselves. So just to close off, maybe a few questions for food for thought. So, should services have metadata? That's an interesting one. So should services become so modular and ubiquitous that eventually you can use metadata to combine these kind of things and create new experiences? Will and should services create themselves? So, if you think about automation and all the intelligence out there and fancy work with data, can these things, if you start looking at predictive technologies, start creating themselves? Heck, they can even do the business model and economic forecasting, and there you go. The guy can just sit back and watch his product create itself. And the last one is, are physical things also becoming atomized? It's not that new. We've had modular furniture. That stuff's all great. I love notions and examples of that. But I am really fascinated by biotechnologies and intelligent materials, and things like 3D printing is maybe not that high tech, but it's really spreading the means to start creating certain things. Lego is a fantastic example of that, but is that maybe going to become more and more prevalent going forward? So that's about it. If you have any questions, please get in contact with me. Just again, my Twitter handle is Marcel RSW. I may have to dash off early today, but Jason and the team has my contact details. If you want to discuss anything, please feel free to get in contact with me. Now, I've got 4 of these to give away.